Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Drew Bird, Associate Professor at the University of Melbourne, and I'm the head of Creative Arts Therapies and a drama therapist. So, my autoethnographic novel is informed very much by being a arts psychotherapist. And I've had a real fascination for many, many years around the therapeutic relationship. And particularly what happens or what might happen if the boundaries are collapsed between a therapist and a client. So I have a natural interest and propensity to wanting to explore professional boundaries and also personal boundaries. We can't separate the personal from the professional any more than we can separate the dance from the dancer. And it's this that particularly informs my approach, particularly in the writing of my first autoethnographic novel, which I've been writing now for the last 2.5 years. And in the novel, I not only explore the potential collapse of a relationship, professional relationship, between a psychotherapist and a client, but also between a teacher and a student, and also between a brother and a sister. And it's this fascination that I have around boundaries and what might happen if we're unable to keep clear boundaries. So, when I trained as a drama therapist over 20 years ago, uh, my tutor said to me, "What are you going to do when you fall in love with your client?" And that fascination has really driven this project. What happens? It's not what if you fall in love with your client, but what will happen when? So there's a sense there that it's a very strong possibility and it will happen at some point during your career. And often I've shared this with my students and they shake their heads and say, "Oh, no, that wouldn't happen." And of course, we like to think that we would keep professional boundaries. I like to think I would. But conditions can change. We can't be confident that we won't collapse our boundaries when working with a client. So the novel's been a real opportunity for me to play safely with this possibility, to explore the kind of conditions, to have a space, if you like, to look more closely, to deepen my understanding of the kind of factors that might cause such a situation to arise. So, in my novel, the relationship between a therapist called Patricia and a client called Amber, it becomes the sort of central theme of the novel. And the novel's driven from the perspective of Amber, the client. So it's a sort of kind of third person narrative, but it's always perceived from the client's perspective. So the story is obviously influenced a lot by autoethnographic theoretical perspectives. And my ideas are very much driven by the thing about autoethnographic developments and research is that you apply the learning from one context into another. So my hope that learning about the collapse of boundaries between a therapist and a client in the novel can give me understanding that I can apply in my practice as a therapist and also as a teacher. So the novel explores the collapse of boundaries between a brother and a sister. In the context of the novel, the brother is called Stephen. Yeah. And it also explores the potential collapse of a boundary between Amber, who's lost her job as a teacher, and an ex-student called Ruby. So I'll just read a snippet from the novel. But before I do that, I just want to talk a little bit about autoethnographic thinking and how important it is to consider this perspective that autoethnography is completely dependent on relationship. The dynamics between, it could be some person and a culture, or in the context of my novel, it's very much between the client and the therapist. So it's very much driven by this very important theme of relationship. And of course, the therapeutic relationship is absolutely crucial to therapy. It's probably the most significant factor often cited for transformation in the client's experience is their relationship with the therapist. So with this very much in mind, I'm going to read you a few snippets from my final chapter of the novel, which explores the last scene between Patricia, the therapist, and Amber, the client. Amber walked the familiar short distance to Patricia's office. Beside the door, she fanned her face with a hand to cool herself down. Before pushing the door ajar, cueing Patricia to get up from her chair. "Hello," said Patricia. Amber hesitated. "Are you okay, Amber?" asked Patricia. "Sorry, yes, fine," said Amber, entering the room, setting down her jacket and bag next to the empty chair before taking her usual place. "I'm glad you made it," said Patricia, offering a beaming smile. Amber sighed. "Sorry I'm so late." Amber lifted and shook the bottom of her t-shirt to generate some cool air. "You wouldn't mind opening the window, would you? I'm so hot." Which was true, but she didn't smell so good either. Patricia pulled open the sash window, a red dress exaggerating all her curves. "How's that?" said Patricia, turning round. "Lovely," said Amber rather cheekily. "Bit of a rush to get here. That's why I look like a red berry," she said, picking up a glass of water and drinking from it. "That's better," announced Amber, nestling the glass in her lap. There was a brief silence as Amber took in the simplicity of the room. The small vase of flowers, the box of tissues, all in their exact places. And noting a new print on the wall behind Patricia before resting her attention on her therapist's colourful self. "Feels ages since I was last here," said Amber. "It's been a week," confirmed Patricia. "Hardly seems possible," said Amber. "So much has happened." "Well," said Patricia, "we've got an hour till 3 o'clock. Amber glanced at the clock on the wall. "Thanks for seeing me today," said Amber, aware she'd initially cancelled today's session. "I was unsure if I'd be back from Brighton in time." "No problem," said Patricia. "This is your weekly slot." Amber always felt snubbed by Patricia's professionalism, turning her face towards the breeze coming in from the window. When there was no attempt from Patricia to remind her to come back into the room, Amber felt disappointed. "Okay," said Amber, turning to face Patricia. "I'm under starter's orders." But the joke didn't seem to land on Patricia's stoic-looking face. Amber went over the lists in her head, the things to talk about, and then let out a deep breath as she ran through her tale as quickly as she could, telling Patricia about Brighton, the search for Stephen, her brother, the pier, the man with the dog, the market, how Stephen had had a seizure and the ambulance had taken him to hospital, where she'd finally caught up with him. Oh, and the dream she'd written down. The final flourish to what sounded even to her like a school report, careful of opinion, leaving out feelings. Amber offered a brief smile. I have some good news, said Amber, unsure if therapy was the place for this sort of announcement. I found Henry, the dog, said Amber, clearly pleased with herself. Mr. Tannings threw his arms around me, and I just stood there like a dummy. I wasn't expecting it. Felt good? Asked Patricia. It did. Something I can feel proud about. Seeing him and his dog, Henry, reunited. Amber stopped herself, put a hand to her chest. Patricia nodded, acknowledging Amber's experience. Sorry. Fancy getting upset about a man and a dog, said Amber, trying to force out a smile. Amber waited on a response from Patricia, aware of the clock in the background, as a composed and unrushed Patricia took her time. Lots happening, said Patricia. Amber nodded, offering a weak smile. There was something in Patricia's tone. Amber adjusted her posture, tried crossing her legs, but the unsettled feeling wasn't so easy to dispel. Anyway, said Amber, wanting to pick up speed, move things on. Not knowing what to say, she sipped from her glass. Noticing the absent ring on her left finger, she was reminded of Stephen, how she'd managed to remove it, locating it in his clenched fist. Okay, so that's just a little bit I wanted to bring to you. So yeah, as you can see, there's the client is having some feelings for the therapist, and they appear unreciprocated. And again, this dynamic, this very real dynamic that between a therapist and a client, and the possibility of falling in love as a therapist with a client, and allowing myself to explore that freely and safely in an autoethnographic novel, in some ways prepares me better for that possibility when it happens. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and yeah, I very much look forward to your responses and comments over the conference. Thank you.